Internalized racism is a generational curse. Today is January 9th, 2026, and this episode has been something that's been on my heart to create for over a year now. And the recent events that happened was just kind of the final straw, and I knew that I needed to speak about this now. I've been wanting to speak so much about how these agents, how so many of them are people of color, and it disgusts me just like it does for so many of us. And I'm the person that talks about generational cycles and generational curses and all these cycles that we are meant to break as Black sheep and as cycle breakers. And it is more important now than ever to remind ourselves that internalized racism is a generational curse. So let's get into it.
Your low self-worth ends here. Welcome to Becoming Enough, a podcast dedicated to breaking down your experience as a Black sheep and understanding how that impacts your self-worth. Your experience as a Black sheep and cycle breaker is unique, and it's time we finally started to talk about it.
Welcome back to the Becoming Enough podcast. I'm your host, Roshni. I'm a self-worth coach, tarot reader, Black sheep, cycle breaker, workshop host, facilitator, and the founder of Black Sheep Experience, the community where we rebuild our self-worth after our messed up childhoods. So thank you so much for being here today. And you likely have heard what happened in recent events with Renee Nicole Good and with Keith Porter Jr. And this is time to speak up. It's past time to speak up. And I have been speaking up on my various platforms and different things, but I knew I've been wanting to talk about internalized racism because this is a plague that so many people of color face in this country, and we are seeing this, but the actions and the consequences of this kind of belief are louder than ever. And internalized racism is a generational cycle. It is something that you are taught. It is something that you learn, whether it is directly from your ancestors or from society and the other people around you. It is a strategy, it's a coping mechanism, and it's a bad one. And it is not lending to anything helpful or productive for our society. And if I'm being completely honest, back when I was growing up in the early 2000s, I believed that there was something wrong with me for the color of my skin. I believed I was wrong for where I came from. And that weighed so heavily on me, and it became a very intentional process in my teenagehood, especially in my 20s and my college years, and up until now, to truly love and honor my culture, to understand more about it, to love myself as a diasporic individual, to honor myself and to see the power in my ancestors, in what they survived and in what they endured, and to take that a step further and transmute it into self-love, into self-acceptance, into self-appreciation and self-celebration. So this is a journey that is very near and dear to my heart. I want to start by defining internalized racism. When I was doing some light research, I saw that there was an initial definition posed by Karen D. Pike, a sociologist, but I actually was digging a little deeper, and I did find an article on racial equity tools. It was actually a study, and it's called Internalized Racism, a Definition, written by Donna Bivens. So I'm going to begin reading and put it up on the screen so you can follow along with me. In trying to understand internalized racism and work towards its elimination, it is important that we do not confuse internalized racism with the other realities that are frequently used to explain or describe dysfunction among people of color. We need to understand that internalized racism is not simply the following: low self-esteem, color prejudice or colorism, stereotyping, or self-hatred. These may be and often are symptoms or results of internalized racism, but they are not the thing itself. Internalized racism is the situation that occurs in a racist system when a racial group oppressed by racism supports the supremacy and dominance of the dominating group by maintaining or participating in the set of attitudes, behaviors, social structures, and ideologies that undergird the dominating group's power. It involves at least 4 essential and interconnected elements. Decision-making. Due to racism, people of color do not have the ultimate decision-making power over the decisions that control our lives and resources. As a result, on a personal level, we may think white people know more about what needs to be done for us than we do. On an interpersonal On an interpersonal level, we may not support each other's authority and power, especially if it is in opposition to the dominating racial group. Structurally, there is a system in place that rewards people of color who support white supremacy and power and coerces or punishes those who do not. Number 2, resources. Resources, broadly defined, e.g. money, time, salaried work, etc., are unequally in the hands and under the control of white people. Internalized racism is the system in place that makes it difficult for people of color to get access to resources for our own communities and to control the resources of our community. We learn to believe that serving and using resources for ourselves and our particular community is not serving everybody. There is also often a self-imposed barrier that makes it difficult for us to respectfully access the resources of other peoples, particularly other peoples of color. Number 3, standards. With internalized racism, the standards for what is appropriate or normal that people of color accept are white people's or Eurocentric standards. We have difficulty naming, communicating, and living up to our deepest standards and values and holding ourselves and each other accountable to them. Too often, we instead grab onto standards set in reaction to the abuse of systemic racism. And number 4, naming the problem. There is a system in place that misnames the problem of racism as a problem of or caused by people of color and blames the disease, emotional, economic, political, etc., on people of color. With internalized racism, people of color might, for example, believe that we are more violent than white people and not consider state-sanctioned political violence or the hidden or privatized violence of white people and the systems they put in place and support. So what this is essentially saying is that internalized racism is an attempt from people of color to assert their power, to liken themselves to something that they will never be in a way to avoid punishment. And while this definition mentioned that self-hatred is not internalized racism within itself, there are aspects of self-hatred that are related to internalized racism. The point here that I'm trying to say is that internalized racism is in itself something that is carried through generations, and it's something that is taught or learned, right? You can look around you and learn. And the thing is, internalized racism doesn't have to be passed down. It doesn't have to be something, it started from somewhere. So at some point, someone in our lineage or yourself decided that you want to be closer to power and you don't see power from where you are. You are only seeing the oppressive system and you think that aligning with it is going to excuse you. You think that aligning with it is going to make you one of them. But if we've learned anything in 2026, there is us and then there is them. And at the end of the day, it's a question of whose side are you on? And something that we are learning is that instead of nitpicking within one another, amongst one another about how people learned something or when they learned something or why they didn't speak up earlier, a lot of us are having to put those things aside because at the end of the day, we have to start somewhere. And we can either continue dividing ourselves or we can unite with the common ground that we do share. This definition mentioned that it is not inherently just self-hatred, but I do see part of this as a form of self-hatred. And when you read more of this paper, Bivens herself does say that it is an assault on love. And I think that that is the most interesting way of putting it because it legitimately does stop people from having love for themselves, having love for their ancestry, their heritage, their nationality, their communities, and themselves. And there is a piece of internalized racism that is connected to this idea of self-hatred. Our communities were punished by the oppressor from existing. These communities were demonized. The religions and celebrations and traditions were demonized. Women were sexualized, certain practices and understandings of gender and expression and sexuality or marriage or love were also sexualized. All these things were broken down to such a small level and completely shifted. And this is why being resistant to propaganda and trusting your own eyes and your own ears is incredibly important because that is something that they have always tried to take away from us. It benefits them for us to believe them and not ourselves, and never forget that. So when you are going down, your generational cycles, and you see that somewhere along the line, people have learned to hate themselves. People have learned to hate their features, hate their identity, hate their culture, hate their traditions, hate their religion. You are seeing firsthand how internalized racism works, how it separates us from our own power, and how it dismantles our communities. And so this idea of turning in on ourselves or of aligning with the oppressor is something that almost develops as a coping mechanism or as a strategy. It's a terrible one. It's not a good one. But in people's twisted minds, it's like, oh, well, if I just do this, I'll be the good ones. I'll be one of the good ones. I'll be one of the excused ones. And as we're seeing in 2026, we've seen this before, okay? This has been prevalent in society and in history forever, but in modern times, it literally cannot be ignored, right? There is no good one. There is no one that's excused. There is no one that's allowed to be that way. That hatred, that disgust is going to live inside of you forever if that is how you are aligning. And at any point, they are ready to throw you under the bus. You are still alone. You might have temporary optics, but that's because you are doing the work for them. You are making the work easier for them by believing what you do, by turning on your own people, and by thinking that that's going to get you some reward. It's not. And this is a cycle that really developed out of a human need for safety. Again, I am not excusing anything. I am not on the side of this mentality, of this behavior, obviously. But what I am saying is that it came from a deeper need to feel safe, from a deeper need to believe that I am not going to be the one who is punished. I want to feel safe, so I'm going to do anything I can in this system to try and find that safety. And I believe that somewhere along the line, many of our ancestors, if this is an ancestral belief within your lineage, many of them were using this as a way to almost make meaning out of senseless violence, to make meaning out of things that did not have any real meaning, that did not have any real purpose, that were so absurd to humanity that people tried to find a way to justify it by turning on themselves. It severed them from their own power. There is a lack of being able to truly love your own children, if that's how you feel. There is a lack of being able to teach them things about your past, about your history, about your lineage, because of that hatred and because of the behavior of trying to align with the oppressor. And sometimes it starts so innocently. Sometimes it starts as being a middle schooler or as a kid in elementary school, just making jokes, or you hear these, racist jokes or these stereotypes or these things in school, and, you want to use humor to deflect or to deal with the bullying that you're facing. So, you start making self-deprecating jokes, but over time, this can evolve into something so much more ugly. And at some point or another, every single person of color has some form of internalized racism. We have some form of internalized homophobia, internalized transphobia, the way that we were internalized misogyny, right? We were raised in these systems where these are the prevalent ideas. And so we absorb that as children, and every single one of us has work to do in this area. And many of you have already been doing this work for so many years, and that's why you don't find yourself caught repeating this, but you have had to intentionally put an end to it, intentionally redirect those thoughts that you were having, intentionally check yourself and your behaviors, even when you are projecting on other people in your community or on other communities, right? Internalized racism, while it is something that we hold towards ourselves, the stereotypes of our own people and our own communities, we can just as much project that onto other communities of color and other marginalized communities as a whole. This is why there's so many nations and so many groups of people of color who are still heavily anti-Black. And I talked about this on my first YouTube channel back in 2016, calling out the South Asian community on its anti-Blackness, because this is a serious issue and is something that every single community needs to learn. So it is never too late to begin this work. This work is some of the most important work that you could do, because it is taking the ability to hold yourself accountable. It is taking your behaviors, your perspectives, your actions, and putting them through this clarification process where you can actually see where they came from, where they stemmed from, to see if they are things that you still want to perpetuate. And no matter who you are, I know so many people will watch this and agree with everything, but then think that they are exempt. And I just want you to ask yourself still, is there anywhere where in my life where I am perpetuating this internalized belief, where I'm perpetuating internalized racism? And for many of you, maybe you have done the work in this area. Maybe for you, it's internalized homophobia, internalized transphobia, internalized misogyny. The list could go on, internalized patriarchy, right? There's different areas, but it's never too late to call yourself out and to call yourself into your power and to see where it is that you can improve, because again, it is us versus them, and we have to have each other's back. And we can't do that if we can't even be honest with ourselves, if we can't even properly reflect our own reflections back to us to see where we are going wrong, to help one another do the work, right? No one else can be able to come into your life and fix everything for you other than you. You have the power of accountability. You have the power of self-reflection. And when people do need change, when people do need to come together, you can come into that process as a better, more clarified version of yourself by doing this work on your own. And I think while it can be incredibly frustrating and we should never feel like we have to educate others, at a certain point, we have to put little pieces of that aside as we're all collectively putting in the work, putting in the energy. We all have to know that some people aren't able to do better because they don't know better. And I'm not turning this around on people who already have enough on their plate to say someone else needs to explain, someone else needs to do more, it's not about transferring responsibility. And that's exactly what I'm saying right now. If you do know better, and if you have the ability or the occasional opportunity to educate or to bring someone in, doing that in a way that allows people to understand can be really helpful. And I'm not saying that this is your job or that this is any one person's duty or that you have to do this. I'm saying when you have capacity, know that it is okay to bring other people in through education or through whatever it is that you excel at. We all have different roles in this. We all have different responsibilities and different contributions in this, and we need to start seeing the power and the beauty in that. We can't expect everyone to be the exact same way, but we can all do our part, and we can, at the bare minimum, constantly be learning more about what it is that we can do, unlearning the things that are harmful to ourselves and our neighbors and our communities. That is the bare minimum responsibility that we each carry. I actually came up with a list of journal prompts that you can ask yourself to use to reflect on this and see where in your life you are still impacted by this behavior and how you can continue to shift out of it and evolve out of it. So if this is something that you're interested in, I have just a single sheet of journal prompts that you can download completely for free. I'm going to link it in the show notes or in the description. You'll be able to download it there. If you don't want to download it, that's okay too. I'm going to read aloud all of the journal prompts so you can still jot them down in your notebook right now. You can just write down a couple that stand out to you and answer those, but I do urge you to do some sort of self-reflection connected to this, because we all can find a way to love our communities better or to love one another better. So if you do feel like you need to tweak some of these journal prompts as well, I kind of designed these prompts to be for someone who is relatively new to this work. I know most of my audience is probably somewhat well versed in this, but I would still rather start at the beginner level. And if you feel like you are at a deeper pace, or you want to tweak or modify these journal prompts, like I said, this is your practice 100%, and you need to do what's going to help you the most. So feel free to tweak them, feel free to adjust them. If you feel like you've done the work for your own community and your own ancestry or your own lineage, like I said, modify these to the areas in which you are still struggling to accept other people, to accept other communities. It is important for us to do this work right now. It is literally life or death. I'm going to begin to read these journal prompts now. Number 1, How does hating myself benefit the system? Number 2, what is the end goal of this system? Number 3, what do I love, respect, and admire about my ancestry, culture, and heritage? Number 4, how would my life be different if my ancestors had loved themselves in the face of oppression? What would the world have looked like in order to make that love possible? Number 5, what role will self-acceptance play in the reclamation of my individual and collective power? Number 6, what kind of future do I want to build for my children or those who come after me? Number 7, what will you remind yourself when the self-loathing thoughts return? And the final prompt is number 8. How has your journey to loving your ancestry, culture, and or community changed your life? And this can be a really beautiful place for self-reflection if you do feel like you have been on this journey of doing this work for quite a while. But like I said, it's really important for us to pause, reflect, and reground into this work and remind ourselves on such a deep personal level what is at stake and what we have benefited from by learning to love and embrace and accept ourselves, our true selves, because that is the source of your power. That is the source of our collective power. And I just posted this video on Instagram today. I'm also going to share it on TikTok later today about how this work, how breaking cycles is inherently political. The world would look completely different if everyone actually loved themselves, healed their trauma, and broke the cycles in their family. So many people grew up traumatized, and instead of breaking the cycle, they decided to perpetuate it. They became the aggressor. They became the one who took their power back by intimidating and hurting other people, by trying to distance themselves from where they came from, instead of owning it and transmuting it and transforming it into something that stands for something better. If everyone does this work, the world would legitimately be a better place. And like I said before, they don't have to do that much if we're willing to do the work for them. The least we could do is make it hard. Why are we trying to make it easier for them? So I know that this was a little bit of a different video for me, but I hope that this is still something that benefited you. I hope that this is something that reminds you and grounds you back into your power, that reminds you that we are each other's hope and that we always will be. And if you do want to do this work alongside someone who legitimately understands what this journey is like, who understands how difficult it is to break these cycles, but who also understands how powerful you really are on your own, then a self-worth coaching session is for you. That is where we can sit down one-on-one, work through any of these issues that you are facing, work through any of the hesitations that you have or your inability to break a cycle and figure out what's deeper there. We can look at the symptoms of these situations and these cycles that keep playing out in your life over and over and over and get to the bottom of what it is that is keeping you there. If you want to reconnect to your power, self-worth coaching is for you. I always say that high self-worth is liberation, and this is what I mean. It will connect you to your self-worth, to your power, when you are able to trust yourself, when you are able to unlearn all of the limitations and all of the expectations that society puts on you. All of these things are genuinely life-changing, and this work will set you free. If you would like to learn more about me, my work, about Black Sheep Experience, if you'd like to see how we can work together in any capacity, if you want to look at the Worthiness Blueprint, my self-paced online course for you to start healing your self-worth on your own without booking a one-on-one session, all of those resources are going to be at blacksheepexperience.com. And I hope that you remember that you are worthy whether you believe it or not. I'm sending you so much love.
Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Becoming Enough. Be sure to rate and leave a review of the podcast so that other Black Sheep and Cycle Breakers like you can find us too. Visit blacksheepexperience.com to learn more about how we can work together to elevate your self-worth and eradicate your worthiness wounds for good. Remember that you are worthy whether you believe it or not. I love you so much. Happy healing.